get started here. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion for At the Heart of Gold, Inside the USA Gymnastics Scandal. We are so glad that you've decided to join us this evening for an impactful discussion on sexual violence on college campuses and in athletic communities. The purpose of this discussion is to provide a safe space for this difficult topic and move forward as a community to work together to prevent sexual violence. Just so you all know, this meeting is being recorded and will be available for you all to view at a later time. Now I'm going to deliver a content warning. At the Heart of Gold and this film discussion will contain some sensitive material, and the content may be disturbing for some listeners. Therefore, we encourage you to practice necessary self-care during and after the discussion. Please feel free to leave at any time if you are triggered. Visit ucspeaksup.org/resources for a comprehensive list of resources for your support. Before I introduce our panelists, I'm going to give a brief background on tonight's event. It was born out of a partnership between Dr. Jennifer Wagman at the UC Global Health Institute, and she's here with us tonight, and the Foundation for Global Sports Development and Sidewinder Films. The purpose of this partnership is to raise awareness about sexual violence, prevent its occurrence on college campuses and in athletic communities, and direct students to resources for their protection. The Foundation for Global Sports Development and Sidewinder Films promotes fair play, education, and the benefits of abuse-free sport. They accomplish this through producing Emmy-nominated and Oscar-nominated documentaries, such as At the Heart of Gold, charitable grants, and Courage First, their initiative focused on preventing abuse in sport. In order to build awareness around preventing abuse, Courage First has launched a nationwide tour of At the Heart of Gold. It was through this tour that Dr. Wagman hosted a private screening of the film in one of her graduate classes. As a professor at the Fielding School of Public Health, Dr. Wagman is also a principal investigator at UC Speaks Up, which is a campus-based violence prevention initiative here at the UC Global Health Institute. Through her research, Dr. Wagman has found that in order to educate and protect student athletes from sexual violence, 3 elements must be in place. First, that independent programs and services must work together with institutions. Second, awareness on this topic is absolutely necessary. And third, that amplifying and including the voices of survivors and allies is critical to this work. With a shared focus on raising awareness and providing resources, the objectives of UC Speaks Up and Courage First are very closely aligned. So we're very excited to continue this partnership across the UC system and bring this discussion to multiple campuses. We're so excited that UCLA is the first. And now I'm going to introduce Dr. Steven Ungerleider. He's the co-founder of the Foundation for Global Sports Development and Sidewinder Films, which has produced Emmy-nominated and Oscar-nominated documentaries. Dr. Steven produced At the Heart of Gold and is going to give us an introduction to the film and the filmmaking process. Then we will dive into the panel discussion questions. So Dr. Steven, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Camilla. I appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. Thanks to Dr. Jennifer Wagman for putting this together. I know a lot of work has gone on to make this event happen. So thank you, and thanks to the whole team at UCLA. I want to thank, first of all, putting this film together was a long journey, a difficult one at many junctures, but extremely rewarding. It was really a team effort, team sport. Melanie, Raffle, Brooke Baumgartner, Megan, my colleagues David and Michael, we actually built quite a large team when we started to take a deep dive into the research around the Nassar case, And even prior to the Dr. Larry Nassar trial, we were engaged with the Olympic Committee and several sports federations, including USA Gymnastics, and some of the situations that we had heard about for many years. As we started to put the pieces together and understand the components of what was involved, the story unfolded, and we realized, even though several people had come to me and said, hey, Stephen, this may not be a good film for you to do. It may not be a healthy project. And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, there's going to be some tension, and there's going to be some people that will push back and be upset, and it may be very difficult. Well, in fact, it was. And I, as a result of the film, I severed my ties with the United States Olympic Committee, where I had served for close to 40 years. I met with the president of the U.S. Olympic Committee, who most of you saw in the film, and the general counsel, as well as the board, and told them up front that I was extremely upset and distressed with some of the things that we had learned. This is even prior to the Nassar trial. And the more we uncovered about sexual assault and predators and coaches who were moving from place to place, whether being checked on or put on a ban list, I became even more distressed. And I shared this with the president, and his response was, you know, Doc, you've done a great job. You've served us well. You've worked with a lot of athletes. You've written some excellent books. But, you know, our lawyers have told us to keep our mouths shut and keep our heads down. So, you know, you go do what you have to do. And if you need to write this script or tell this story, go for it. But we in no way want to be involved or engaged with you. So that was a tough journey after decades and decades of work with this institution. So I separated myself from the Olympic Committee, and as we moved through the process, we had some great folks. So the sister survivors were amazing to work with. They were great inspirations to me. As a father of two girls who were athletes in their younger years, in fact, both were gymnasts, this film came home, very close to home. I'm a former collegiate gymnast as well, so I had some deep emotional investment as a writer and a psychologist in this process. You all saw the work of the Honorable Judge Rose Aquilina, who in my mind has reframed and reshaped the notion of criminal justice and how we need to support our victims and our survivors and allow victim impact statements to be made in court. I don't know if most of you know this, but this is not always the case. What she did and what you witnessed is atypical. It happens in a lot of more courtrooms now, but she really opened the door to allow a voice to be heard. And working for years on the film, we became very close friends, and she has been a great supporter of not only our team, but allowing us to go on campuses and show the film prior to COVID and now being part of panels. The other component, besides the sister survivors and Judge Aquilina, were the media. And the folks at the New York Times, my friend Juliet McCurr and Rebecca O'Brien at the Wall Street Journal, and the folks in Los Angeles, Scott Reed. You saw them in the film, and you saw how incredibly articulate they were, and we were very blessed to have them. A lot of media are very shy about they'll write a great piece, but they're shy about going on record or on film. But these folks actually wrote very important stories over many, many years. They had been tracking the sexual predator behavior and this whole culture of sexual assault for 10, 12 years, and had been constantly shedding light on this culture that was perpetrated by these predators, and then subsequently the cover-up. Many of them wrote very long, detailed exposés on the cover-up by the Olympic Committee, by USA Gymnastics, and other national governing bodies. So the composite of all this, having the sister survivors, having Judge Aquilini, and having the media made our job a little bit easier. And like I said, it was definitely a team effort, team sport, and I feel very blessed to be part of it. It was probably one of the most important moments of my career to be part of this effort over 4 years. And once again, I'm glad you're all here, and I'm glad that you all had a chance to see the film.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction to the film. It's such a well-made film, and I think it provides so much value to any athlete who watches it. So thank you for producing it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I'm going to dive into the panelist introductions now. We have an absolutely star-studded lineup for panelists this evening. First, let me introduce you to Professor Marcy Hamilton. Marcy was featured in the film, and she is the founder, CEO, and legal director of Child USA, a nonprofit dedicated to interdisciplinary evidence-based research to improve laws and public policy to end child abuse and neglect. She is the leading expert on clergy sex abuse and child sex abuse statutes of limitation. Next on the panel, we have Chrissy Weathersby-Ball. Chrissy is a stuntwoman, yoga instructor, former competitive gymnast, as well as a loving wife and mother of 2 children. Chrissy is one of the sister survivors who competed at Michigan State University, and she is now an advocate for victim protections such as Title IX. And last but not least, we have Larissa Boyce. Larissa is a former gymnast who grew up in Williamston, Michigan, before attending Michigan State University. You may remember Larissa as she and her story were also featured in the film. She now works as an advocate for survivors, and she is a mom of 4 beautiful children. Thank you all to the panelists for being here and for being willing to share your expertise and experiences to provide value to this conversation. And now I'll start with the panel discussion questions. For everyone in the audience tonight, as we go through the discussion, please submit your questions via the Q&A feature, and we will do our best to get to them as we flow through the questions. And it's important that it's the Q&A feature and not the live chat. Those are 2 different features. Okay, so our first question is, in the interest of combating negative stigma around sexual assault and sexual violence, what is one of the most common misconceptions that you've experienced? And Marcy, if you'd take it away and answer that first question.
So thanks so much for including me tonight, and At the Heart of Gold is such an important contribution. I hope everybody gets a chance to watch it. So, you know, the hard part about sexual abuse is that it's not a bit like a broken leg. You know, if you have a child and they break their leg, they run, they're hurting, they run to mom and dad, they're taken to the hospital. It's obvious there's a problem, everybody discusses it. Unfortunately, with sex abuse for children all the way up through adults, there's so much shame and humiliation, but also scientifically there's the trauma. And it makes it hard to talk about it. And so unlike a broken leg, there's all of this pain that can be generated, but it doesn't lead the individual to report it. So the average age of coming forward for sex abuse is 52. And that's the sort of information I think we all need to understand, and we all need to be supportive of survivors that take a while to come forward.
Wow, I didn't know that. Thank you for that statistic. Larissa, would you like to answer this question?
Sure, yeah, I think one thing that people don't realize is that I think people think that after you report, you should be okay. You should move on. And that's not how it works. It's something that as a survivor, you deal with on a daily basis, almost a minute by minute basis, really. It's not like a broken bone that heals and then you're fine. It's something you constantly, emotionally, even physically, mentally, whatever, have to deal with on a daily basis. It doesn't just go away.
Great, thank you. Chrissy, would you like to answer the first one as well?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Larissa was saying, it doesn't just go away. And I think from an athlete's perspective, there is so much shame to really feeling like you're weak. Like there's just a weakness of not being able to handle the situation that you're in. And I think that we've been trained from very young to make everything our responsibility and our fault. And so I think that's the biggest misconception I definitely had with even trying to figure this whole thing out, trying to make it make sense. And it's still difficult and doesn't seem like it makes sense because, I think that deep conditioning as an athlete that we are supposed to handle it. And if you didn't handle it, then why didn't you handle it? It's always kind of this internal issue that it was your personal failing, along with the shame that Marcy was talking about, that just kind of chokes you into silence.
Such an important point that we as athletes we're expected to do so much and be able to handle so much. So when something like this comes up, it's hard for us to say, oh, we need help, or reach out for that support. Such an important point. Okay, so our second question, this speaks to just the intensity of what happens with sexual abuse. It's a really intense journey for survivors, and Marcy, you do some really intense work. So from your perspective, what can we do as a community to make sure that something like this with the Larry Nassar case, where he exploited so many women, doesn't happen again?
So, what we've learned is that this is a cultural problem. It's across the whole culture. It's in sports, it's in our churches, it is in our schools. And so none of this is going to be solved by just identifying one perpetrator, sadly. It's really a matter of changing the system. And the system requires the creation, and this is what Child USA is working on. We want to develop, and we are working on, the gold standard. What do you do with institutions that permit series of abuse? The Catholic Church has been kind of a paradigm, but it's because it's our largest institution, religious institution, and it's just been this example of how not to handle child sex abuse. And then it turns out the same thing was true at Penn State, and the same thing was true at Michigan State, and the same thing is true at UCLA. So what do you do? What you do is you figure out how to prevent it, and it's going to take a combination of two things. We need to educate parents. We need to educate the students and the athletes. We need to educate the coaches. And we need to educate the general culture. Most people have no idea how common this is, but it's common because we've ignored it. So we released a couple of weeks ago, and you can check all this out on childusa.org. But we released a study of the 32 archdioceses in the United States child protection policies. You'd think after being examined for 20 years, they would be the gold standard. They're not. They're all over the map. And there is not a single one that's doing everything it should be. This week, we've released our Boy Scout of America study. And also really troubling statistics. It's a model of child extracurricular activity that I'm not sure can work. I'm not sure you can let children go into the woods with a very few number of adults. So what do we do in the universities, which is really the last frontier on this universe? We have to empower the athletes. We have to make them feel like their voices are heard. And let me just end with this. We did an elite athlete study and started publishing the results a couple of months ago, and we are continuing to work on that. One of the things we found is that although there is a high percentage of elite athletes who are sexually abused, only 5% knew where to report abuse. So we are really letting our athletes down. We need to tell them up front, this is where you go, this is where you find help, and you deserve help. So that's a thumbnail sketch of a major project.
Absolutely. So important for athletes to know what resources are available to them. Chrissy or Larissa, would you like to answer that second question? From your perspective, what do you think as a survivor should happen in the community to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again?
You know, for me, I would totally agree with Marcy in education. It's education. It's showing people what to do if sexual assault happens, where to go, who to report to, and the process that entails. Because I didn't know what that process was when I reported. And I think I would have, had I known who to go to, what to do, the steps to take, I probably would have kept trying to tell somebody about what had happened to me.
Thank you. Chrissy?
Yeah, I mean, Marcy and Larissa, I mean, absolutely what you've said is so powerful. And I think, just to piggyback off of that, as a college athlete, for this to never happen again, it can't be tolerated. And right now, it's being tolerated because there are no penalties for sexually assaulting college athletes. So right now, as we speak, there are no NCAA rules at all that make it a violation to sexually assault a college athlete. That is a doctor, that is a coach, that is a professor. There are no rules to protect college athletes. And so I think that when a tolerance when the tolerance is changed to being absolutely not tolerated, that we are not okay with our athletes being treated this way, is when it will actually change. And of course, it's not just with athletes, it's with every child or every person that is vulnerable in these institutions that are susceptible to abuse. When the tolerance, you know, as Marcy is talking about, raising that statute of limitation, know that there will be a penalty if you are caught doing this, because this is not acceptable. And until we as a community, as institutions, and laws, frankly, make this something that is unacceptable, then it will continue to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that input. I'd love to go back to the idea of misconceptions for a moment, because a lot of people, and myself included, before watching this film didn't know what the act of grooming was. So what is something that most people don't realize about grooming and sexual abuse? What exactly is grooming? How does that behavior come about? And particularly with the Larry Nassar case, I think that's a perfect example of how grooming was used, but maybe can you give another example of how it might happen today in an athletic setting?
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So here's the most important speech I ever heard on these issues, and it was an FBI agent in 2002, Ken Lanning, and the Catholic abuse scandal had just hit, and so I was a law professor and gathered all these people together and said, okay, explain this to me. Here's what he said. He said, here is how you know that someone is a predator, a sex predator. He said, he's the nicest guy in the room. And it's not that he just seems nice. He really is nice. He got your trust. He's gotten everybody's trust. And that's how he gets access to children and young adults alone. And I have never forgotten that. It describes Nasser to a T. It describes Jerry Sandusky perfectly, describes the priests that were beloved in these families perfectly. We can't trust our instincts on this issue because the people who are dangerous know that they've got to get us to trust them to do what they're going to do. So, so for athletes on campus, there just have to be rules. You can't, you and the coach can't be alone. The door can't close. You're not staying in the same hotel room. You're not traveling in a car by yourselves. Athletes just don't have a chance against that kind of behavior. Grooming is, it's when someone, it behaves in manipulative behavior, but it really seems great to the one who's receiving it.
Hmm. Chrissy or Larissa, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, Marcy, I appreciate your perspective so much. And I learned so much on these panels because I think as an athlete, we have been trained to think a certain way. And I think that when you get to a certain level as an athlete, you are trained to listen and obey. And if you don't, there is punishment and there's ramification to that. And so as you're talking about the nicest person in the room, I think at the college level, and not everybody has a bad college experience. Let me preface it by that. But to those that are in a very difficult college experience, you know, you look to that person that can help you. There's the one person that was like Larry. I mean, he always helped. And I was also sexually abused by one of my coaches in college. And that grooming process happened very slowly. An appointment to a psychologist, talk alone with the door shut. All of these things that I had no idea was grooming until I was over 40 years old. So I think that, as Larissa had pointed out before, the lack of education, athletes to, you know, submit from a very young age carries that have stood. It is something that I think is layered, and you know, I'm still learning about grooming at almost 43 years old. So
yeah, it seems so complicated. Okay, so I think I'm going to move to the next question. And this is directed at Larissa and Chrissy specifically as survivors. For you and for other survivors, something that is a very personal experience has become public. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that's been like for you? Maybe some of the downsides and also some of the positive things that have come out of it. Larissa, would you go ahead and start?
Sure. Honestly, it's been a roller coaster. It's lonely. But it's also empowering, being able to use this awful experience that I went through to create positive change by sharing my story. That is incredibly empowering and worth it. But I'm not gonna lie, it has not been an easy road. It has been the most challenging thing I've ever been through. But I know that the end result is going to make this world a better place for my kids, for the people who come after me, for the people who I wish would have been there. I wish somebody would have been there for me, to speak up for me, to show me that it's something you can talk about. So, like I said, all over the place, roller coaster, hardest thing ever, but super empowering and worth it.
Thank you so much. Christy, would you like to answer that question too?
Yeah, I mean, Larissa, your analogy of a roller coaster is exactly that. It has just been a whirlwind. I think that, you know, for me, I was a Jane Doe at the beginning. I wanted to be anonymous. And when I realized that, you know, there was a lot of work that needed to be done, and that a lot of people in powerful positions were digging their heels in and not wanting to make a change, was when I realized it was necessary to come forward and be public. And I think that, you know, the first word that comes to mind is brutal. I mean, it's been difficult, you know, having to face not only what's happened, but to deal with it when the doors are shut, you know, but it has also provided resources I have never had access to before in my life, and an understanding of what has happened that I had always been carrying with me, but I didn't realize, you know, I was carrying something. And so being connected with, you know, Larissa, all of the other sister survivors, and all of so many other survivors has been empowering, because there are so many people that still need help, you know, and so it makes it worth it. And the healing is worth it. Like, the honest, real healing is worth the brutalness of coming forward.
Thank you so much for sharing both of your experiences right there and how you've been able to find purpose in it. So the next question is specifically for parents or caregivers or family members of somebody who is a survivor. Do you have advice for any parents or caregivers so that they can better support the survivors in their lives? Parents, caregivers, family members. Marcy, would you like to answer that question first?
So, you know, the thing that survivors really need the most, especially when they're starting to come out, is to be believed and to be listened to. You know, it's tragic because there are many child sex abuse survivors who do not tell anybody. And they won't tell anybody until their parents pass away, because they're so scared of hurting their parents. So what we need is to understand that the earlier someone can come forward, and Chrissy and Larissa, thank God, came forward well before 52, the average. It's a healthier outlook. It's a greater and brighter horizon. But listen, be non-judgmental, but also understand that therapy is a necessity. Therapy is a necessity for the survivor. It's frequently a necessity for loved ones to be able to cope with what's happened to the survivor, and also reporting it. So whether it's reporting it to the authorities or reporting it to the institution to make sure the institution is fully aware, it's all about being validated, because it's not their fault. And that's what they need to understand.
Awesome. Thank you. Larissa, would you like to answer that question as well? What kind of advice would you have given to your parents if you could go back in time on how to best support you?
Just saying, I believe you. I am here for you. What can I do to help you? Just though it's that simple. Just like Marcy said, be validating whoever the survivor is, being validated that it's not your fault. It's, I'm here for you no matter what. And I believe you, and I will walk with you through this process.
Very good. Christy, do you have an answer for that question too?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that is so important. And as Marcy touched on, the therapy and the specific therapy for this type of trauma, like I didn't realize just the vast difference between going to a general psychologist and somebody that specializes in trauma and sexual abuse. I think that the love from caregivers paired with just having my eyes opened with the education of how all of this, like what it means, has really been life-changing.
Thank you so much for that. So this next question is about Title IX. And I think that there's a lot of confusion on this topic of Title IX among student athletes, among students, and once again, to the point of education, we need to be much more educated on this topic as athletic communities. So the question is, what are some of the current barriers in the Title IX system for victim and student protections, and what improvements can we make to the system? And I think this is especially pertinent currently because there were some recent changes to Title IX protections for athletes. So Marcy, will you start us off?
So, you know, in my view, the biggest problem with Title IX is that the victim is forced to face their accuser, the person they're accusing, in public, essentially. And it treats them as though they're on the same plane. And sadly, recent developments coming out of the Department of Education, the federal department, have been more concerned about the perpetrator than they have been about the victim. So Title IX has a long way to go. It is not yet providing the kind of victim-centered support that's needed. I mean, tragically, I know that we have athletes that are forced to go through it right now, and it's not producing the kind of justice that they need, which means it's not preventing the kind of abuse it should. So I think Larissa's even more knowledgeable than I am.
Great. Then Larissa, take it away.
Well, I would say, knowing what I know now about Title IX, I would have never, ever reported to them. Honestly, if I had to go back, I would never do it, because it's not something that is saying, I believe you, to the survivor. It's saying, okay, now prove it. And I feel like Chrissy has had more experiences with Title IX. I never filed a Title IX report, and frankly, I never would. So that's how messed up it is.
May I piggyback off that answer and say, who would you have filed to and who would you have reached out to if not Title IX?
I think had I known the process, I would have reached out to local police enforcement, because they could actually do something about my claim. They could actually convict somebody, or they could charge somebody with a crime. And Title IX doesn't really do that. I think it's kind of, to be frankly honest, it's kind of a joke.
Okay. I think that's important information. Thank you. Chrissy, would you like to give your input?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably talk to you all night about Title IX and the failings of Title IX. And this goes back even before the changes that have happened, when Amanda Thomas-Shaw reported Larry Nassar and her Title IX investigation, as Larissa is referring to. It was dismissed because there were other trainers, from what I know of, that advocated on his behalf, and he was able to go back. So there was a huge failing there before the changes even happened in Title IX. And as Marcy has mentioned, now, because of the changes that Betsy DeVos has made within the Department of Education, it is very much something that, as a person that comes forward, you absolutely have to prove that, that this person has committed sexual harassment. So for me, I not only had Larry Nassar, but I was also sexually abused by a coach. And this coach was still coaching at the time that I put forward my Title IX case. the reason why I put that forward to Title IX was because I knew this person had access to over 500, approximately 550 athletes. And the sole purpose was to prevent more potential sexual harassment or sexual abuse. As Marcy has said, those outcomes are just the outcome, and what I had to go through for that process was 424 days approximately was my entire Title IX case. I had to actually see this person in a hearing. And there was so much that happened behind the closed doors of feeling very little to no support, even by the university, that, you know, unfortunately Title IX, there's no backing to that. And so I think that we have to continue to fight for the rights of student athletes. Right now in Title IX, coaches and trainers are not even mandatory reporters. I think that's very important to say, because me and a former Michigan State gymnast who are about 20 years apart, we actually went and spoke directly to the Department of Education in the executive offices of the United States. And we told them what happened. We told them that there were trainers that were told of this. We told them that were coaches that were told of the abuse of Larry Nassar and that it wasn't reported. And yet they still left that out of Title IX. And so I feel that any platform that I'm on, that I shed light on the failings, again, the tolerance that we, I say we because it is, you know, a law, that it is failing our young adults and our kids the protection that they deserve.
Thank you. And I think it's so important that you bring that up, because if we don't talk about it, we're not going to know how to fix it. And if we don't know about it, then it won't be fixed. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
Okay, so our next question is, again, for the survivors. What has it been like to connect with and help other survivors? I know that with the sister survivors together have created an amazing community that has been very uplifting according to how the film has portrayed it. So how has it been personally for you, Larissa?
You know, for me, it gave me the strength to continue to speak out and continue to just show people that this is not something that's okay, to have the strength and the courage to continue to fight for justice for survivors, knowing that we were not alone, that we had all experienced something similar, was very empowering. And it was almost like we had this driving force pushing us to continue each day that we went to court, each day that we were speaking about our truth, about what had happened. I don't know what the right word is. It almost like, it gave us an energy to continue to speak up and continue to say, you know what, I'm not a number. I am not a Jane Doe. This is my name, and this happened to me. I am a person. And so it really empowered a lot of people, and it was really amazing how that happened, knowing that we were not alone.
That's so amazing. There's so much power in community, and I can say that specifically for my eating disorder recovery. I know that without community, I don't know if I would still be here, and it's so powerful to be able to connect with other people. Chrissy, what has it been like for you to connect with other sister survivors?
Well, I mean, it's honestly been life-changing for me. I don't think I ever would have come forward. I don't think that I would have ever processed that I was even a part of this, other than being a spectator if you can believe it, until I listened to them testify, honestly. And, you know, as Larissa said afterwards, as a Jane Doe, it was very isolating. And it wasn't until I met everybody for the first time in person that I just was like, oh, I'm not alone, you know, because there's so much shame and there's so much suffering and silence. I think, you know, Camila, even as you talk about mental health, there's such a silent suffering there. And the shame of sexual abuse is crushing, you know, to your race and to your identity. And so I think that when you connect with other people, especially my sisters, you know, but even so, I've met complete strangers, and it's like we're instantly connected because yeah, I don't know if there's a healing there. Marcy, you probably have a way more articulate way of explaining what it actually is, but it has truly been life-changing for me.
So beautiful. Marcy, do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
You know, it's just, it's so heartwarming, I gotta say, to listen to you two talk about the way in which the universe is working with survivors, and Camilla as well. You know, the eating disorders is a major part of this universe. And it does take everybody banding together and talking together. And it's kind of like when someone opens their mouth, then everybody else can stand up and say it too. And that's what's giving power to the vulnerable. And that's why the powerful are starting to fall. So that's what gets me up in the morning. I really admire you both for all you've done in your universe, but also it helps everyone.
That's amazing. Powerful words right there. Thank you. Oh, the next question I think is a great segue. Why, excuse me, why do you do the work that you do? For all of you, how has what you went through as a survivor impacted your decision to go into the work that you're doing now, and drive you forward into serving others? And how about we start with Chrissy?
Okay, well, why is because it's still a huge issue. You know, I think that I've talked to a lot of current athletes that have felt the same way that we felt, you know, over 20 years ago, of feeling almost owned by your sport, you know, and that, you know, a lot of athletes, and again, it's not all athletes, but a lot of athletes come from nothing, you know, and this is their way out. And so, you know, there are some major systemic issues. The work that I'm doing with the National College Players Association on their board, where we are continuing to fight for the health and safety of student athletes. Like you said earlier, Camila, just bringing an awareness so that people understand that student athletes are physically punished if they don't perform. There are no medical oversights to doctors, trainers that are caring for athletes, and athletes don't have rights to their name, image, and likeness. All those things are major issues. And a lot of athletes, former and current, feel trapped. And so the why is our young adults and kids, frankly, are still not being protected. And currently, there are no NCAA rules preventing sexual assault of college athletes. I might have already said that, but I'll continue to say that over and over again, because it's that horrendous of a thing that's going on right now. If there's no rules for the sexual abuse of college athletes, it's unimaginable that the NCAA will publicly say that it is not their responsibility to protect college athletes when they are somehow capable of monitoring whether a coach gives an athlete pizza money or whether an athlete receives $100 for groceries. It's ridiculous, frankly, for the safety of college athletes to not be more of a priority. And so that is the reason why I continue to do this work.
I think that you so eloquently pointed to the fact that we need to prioritize the health and safety of the athletes. It should absolutely be a priority over so many other things that are prioritized currently. Marcy, would you like to answer that question? What's your why for doing this work?
So, so I clerked at the United States Supreme Court for Justice O'Connor and was a law professor. And I ended up getting involved in the clergy sex abuse cases because I was a First Amendment specialist. And I looked around, I said to all the lawyers, why can't they sue? What's up with the statute of limitations? And they all said, oh, it's too short for almost all the victims in the country. And so I wrote this book, Justice Denied, and I really just wrote it to solve the problem because I thought it was such a no-brainer. Statute of limitations were getting in the way of justice of victims, and we should just get rid of them and then let the victims come forward and give them justice. And I published the book, and I was immediately attacked by the bishops and realized, oh, it's obvious, and they're still going to fight it. So that was almost 20 years ago. And I guess I'm like a dog with a bone. I am just not going to drop it. And until the victims have justice, access to justice, until our kids are safe, this is what I'll be doing. So that I'm going to go to a beach and write a novel, but that's the ways.
That sounds pretty nice. I'd like to go to the beach and write a novel too.
I'll meet you there.
Great. Perfect. Larissa, would you like to answer what's your why for doing this work?
You know, honestly, my why is that I wish I would have had somebody that had done this for me. And because I didn't have that, what I thought was, if I don't do it, who will? So, and I thought about my kids. I thought about people coming after me. If I don't speak up about the issue of sexual assault, if it remains this taboo thing that nobody wants to talk about, that people are embarrassed to talk about, nothing will ever change. So that is why I do what I do. That is why I've been speaking on panels across the country and trying to educate people, trying to make this topic something that people can talk about without cringing. Because that's the only way it's going to change. The only way we change is by continuing the conversation, by continuing to educate. And so that's why I am doing what I'm doing.
Amazing. All of your whys are so honorable and so purpose-driven, and I love that this is purpose-driven work. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit because we had a great question come in from Elizabeth O'Neill about Title IX. And so I'll just read it out loud. Does it make sense to use Title IX as a punitive body at all then? It seems to me, watching what has played out in college, at USAG, etc., they should have had victim advocate services at Title IX to help with filing with law enforcement rather than having these separate tribunals to go through repeatedly. Marcy, maybe do you want to start us off with that one?
Completely agree. You know, the biggest mistakes the churches have made, the biggest mistake the Boy Scouts made is thinking they can handle it on their own. And the universities have done the same thing. If these are crimes, if these crimes don't go to the authorities, the poison stays in the system and circulates. So yes, what we should have is victim advocates. We also need victim advocates all the way through the system. There should have been victim advocates standing by all of the survivors at the sentencing hearing for Larry Nassar. We need support for the victims, and until we have that, we won't have the kind of merciful society that we really are, that we really aim for. But right now, Title IX isn't working, partly because the authorities aren't brought in.
Got it. Thank you. Larissa or Chrissy, do you have anything to add to Marcy's answer, or should I move on to the next one?
Well, I mean, I just think that, you know, there are so many hoops that you have to jump through right now to report to the right person. And so it's just like, you know, earlier when you talked about, you know, how do we change this? Well, again, we have to make it so that everybody knows that if anybody even gets a whisper of sexual assault or harassment, it's being reported. As Marcy said, advocates come in and there is support and helping that person navigate all the next steps. And right now, that's just not the case. And I think, I mean, it's intentional. The law is that way intentionally so that it's harder. It's harder to report. It's harder to come forward. There's a lack of support. And until we remove those barriers, make it, you know, like looking through mud, trying to report somebody, then, you know, it's going to be difficult. Until then, I think that that institutions have to make it their mission to educate students, athletes on exactly who that they can go to, exactly who that they can talk to without penalty of losing their scholarships and other things, because right now that's still the case. You know, a lot of student athletes in particular have a lot to lose, frankly, coming forward. So yeah, I think that's a very complicated question and point being brought up for sure.
Thank you so much for that input. It's very complicated and hard for a lot of us to wrap our heads around. So thank you all for your knowledge. Just so everybody knows, we do have 3 more questions on the list of panel questions that we have prepared. And then if we have time after that, we'll go through a couple of them in the question and answer tool. So the next question is directed once again at Chrissy and Larissa as survivors. What has your healing process looked like? And Larissa, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Sorry, I'm laughing because it has been a process. I will say that. Like I said before, a roller coaster. Some days are good. Some days are I don't want to get out of bed. It's not that bad anymore. But when I was first starting to go through and accepting the fact that I was a survivor, it was very hard to get out of bed. It was very hard to get motivated to do anything productive because it hurt. I not just mentally and emotionally hurt, my body physically hurt. It was something that I don't think people realize how much sexual assault affects a person. It affects every part of you. And so, you know, I also had to go through a separate trial because I had told my coach about it. And so that actually just finished up in August. So once that finished up, I can't even begin to tell you how much freedom I felt from that. So my healing process has been quite long. It wasn't just the past 4 years, you know, of trying to get through everything. It was now I finally feel like I can breathe and move on, really truly move on, because I don't have anything hanging over me anymore. So, you know, it's a process. It's a lot of emotions, and I think, you know, what people need to know if you're a survivor, just be gracious with yourself. It's okay if you can't get out of bed, and not to feel guilty about that, because you're healing, you're working through it. And so to just, like I said, be gracious with yourself and your emotional process that for whatever reason is taking the course that it needs to take.
I think that's absolutely such an important point, that in any healing process, in any sort of trauma, I can relate to that. And eating disorder recovery too, just grace in the process, compassion for yourself in the process. Any sort of healing is going to take time and effort. It's a lot of effort. So thank you for that. That's such an important point. Marcy, would you like to talk about the science of what the healing process looks like?
So first of all, I can't tell you how many survivors I've spoken to who have exactly the experience Larissa is talking about, where part of the healing is they're in such emotional and physical, it's real trauma, physical pain, they can't get out of bed. And so I love that what we're hearing is be gracious with yourself, be forgiving of yourself. It certainly wasn't your fault. But the science here is that the way that trauma operates on each individual is distinctive. So you may be the person who couldn't get yourself moving for a year. You may be the person who really broke down for about a month. It's individual, and that's why the treatment has to be individual. It has to be tailored to the individual, to what they need. And we are blessed now with a lot of different types of treatment. But as Chrissy said earlier, you need therapists that are trained in the field and understand trauma and understand that it is a whole system reaction. It's not just in your head. It's not just observable injury. It's the whole system is breaking down from trauma. So it's healable, but it takes science and it takes understanding. It takes so much self-forgiveness, and that you've heard that today from all three of you, that you just got to forgive yourself for being a human.
Absolutely. Chrissy, would you like to give your personal perspective on your healing process?
Sure. I mean, it's, I think that, as an athlete or former athlete, again, I know that you know this really well too, Camila, is that, to reach out for help is like you're weak. And so as now being very removed from sport, having an incredible husband, incredible support system, I realized slowly, and it was slow, that asking for help is not weak. And I even had to get over the word of victim, because I was like, oh my gosh, no way. Because as athletes, again, to even be categorized as a victim is almost a form of weakness. I had said once that athletes don't see themselves as victims or survivors, merely somebody that couldn't handle it. And I think that we might categorize that for all mental health issues, is that it's just something I couldn't handle. Whereas, as I have been healing and having days where I couldn't get out of bed, talking to those that understand this, as well as professionals that understand trauma, that it manifests in our body, if we don't deal with it. And that's what was happening to me. I was like, oh, I'm fine. And yet I was getting cysts, and I was literally internally ill for starting the year after I left college all the way through. I had major internal issues and sickness. I just never knew where it was coming from. And so to kind of have that broken open was debilitating, absolutely, at first. But as the process has gone on, it does get easier. And when those whispers of shame come up, then I kind of go back to the team, literally the love team of people that have compassion, grace, and that are educated. Because like when I listen to Marcy talk to me about the science of that, I can handle that piece, because then it's like, oh wait, it's not my failing. Because again, our programming as athletes are, it's our failing. Like, we weren't strong enough. And so I really appreciate even the opportunity to be on these panels, because I learned so much about the healing process, like a real, honest healing process, and not just something that's fake and that we're like, oh, we're good. You know, when the movie's over, everybody's great, because that's just not reality.
Absolutely. So much value in that. Thank you. So our next question is, what should a coach or athletic director do to make their team climate safe for survivors? How can coaches and directors or administrators serve both their athletes and their institutions? And that's a very loaded question, I realize. So I don't want to call anyone out for this one. I'm going to leave it up to you all to volunteer who wants to go first or not answer it.
Well, I'll jump in. Why not?
Thank you, Marcy.
So, team climate. I think one of the most important things is we have got to protect whistleblowers. We need to start protecting the assistant coaches, the maintenance workers, the parents who are watching, and the other teammates that have the capacity to report concerns about abuse. So the coaches I worry most about are the ones who don't take any instruction themselves, who don't let anybody communicate with them about what this athlete needs, why this athlete is having issues, and the ones that really only want to work either one-on-one or in special alone time. That's a control system. And for a coach to be successful in nurturing the human being in front of them, it can't just be about control. So part of it is, we've commodified athletes. We've made them things rather than human beings, and we have a long way to go. There are coaches increasingly doing the right thing. There's an organization called the Positive Coaching Alliance, which has been around for quite a while. But there are also, there's a burgeoning set of considerations. But one of the things is thinking of the teammates and the athletes as humans, first and foremost, and then as, the amazing machines that they are.
Amazing. Thank you. Larissa or Chrissy, would you like to answer that question?
I can answer. It goes back to the education. And I think that there needs to be specific systems in place from the top down. I mean, as simple as, this is what you do when. And then this is what you do next. It needs to be very specific, and everybody needs to be on the same page. And if they don't follow the rules of what you're supposed to do, then there's consequences. And unfortunately, that's how it should be. Unfortunately, people don't just do the right thing, but it almost has to be, like you're talking to a toddler. This is what happens when you do this. This is what you need to do. And if you don't do it, there's consequences. So again, there needs to be just really specific systems in place and rules in place that everybody knows about, that everybody knows this is what I'm supposed to do if this happens.
That's such a good point. And our final question is, what kinds of athletic cultures contribute to sexual violence and this issue in general? And what kind of cultures can foster both health and healing? And I think that you would be great to start us off with an answer to this question.
So the athletic culture, what kind of culture contributes to this issue? Yeah, this is a very big question, because on the college level, coaches' entire livelihoods depend on their athletes' performance, period. So as an athlete, we knew that, well, I didn't know before I got to college, but when I got there, I knew that my coach's job depended on our performance, and that her kids and her family had health care and benefits and could eat based off of how we performed. And that's across the board. It's not just our sport. It's basically every sport, at least in NCAA, that, your performance, your coach's job and livelihood is based off of the athlete's performance. And as Marcy said before, this makes athletes a commodity. There's a lot of money generated by certain athletes performing. Every year, we all know that they generate a lot of money and don't have access to that money that they're generating. And so there's just this system that is contributing to, as Marcy said, absolute control over these young adults and how they can maneuver and grow in a healthy way. And I think until that changes, this will not change, because right now the system is set up as an abusive system. And so every day as we speak, there are young adults being abused right now. Many of them we watch on TV. There are no oversights for the medical. As I've said before, the people that are caring for them, there's just a real lack of oversight, period. And as we touched on, it's intentional. And so that has got to change, and there cannot be a tolerance to this. So.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Speaking to the second part of the question, would either Larissa or Marcy like to speak on what kind of culture that we can foster? How can we move forward so that we can contribute to better health and healing for athletes?
Well, what the science tells us is you actually get better performance from a nurturing atmosphere and a supportive atmosphere, and actually one that when you get injured, you get treated. And not from one that tears you down. And so, one of the things as a culture we've been watching is with the NFL, we have serious concussions, right? And it was going on forever. Nobody was paying attention to it, despite the fact we had the science to understand it. That is just it's a morality play for all of sport. In the elite athlete study we did, we learned that many athletes are physically injured either through the sport or from the coach, and they do not heal. They are thrown back in the ring, they're thrown back on the pitch, and they do not heal. And so what we need to do is flip the switch and turn it over to a nurturing and it's basically turning, children used to be property. Now children are persons. Athletes were property, and now they're persons. And treating them as human beings is what's going to change the world, both for better sports, better performance. But I have to agree with Chrissy right now, which is that the system is broken and it doesn't work. And there are wonderful athletes in this country, and they're doing wonderful things, and there are some great coaches. But as a system, there's a lot to do.
I think that's a fantastic answer. Thank you. So I think there was a great question that came in through the Q&A feature in the chat, and I think we have time for one more question so that we can end promptly at 7:30. It's from Haley Johnson. And she says, as a former collegiate gymnast, how can we go about combating and educating the youth about manipulation and emotional or verbal abuse that tends to create an environment for sexual abuse? How do we dismantle the toxic culture and environment to ensure a better environment for upcoming generations? And I would imagine that she might be specifically talking about gymnastics here.
So let me just say quickly, and I can't believe I haven't said this yet, but I mean, this has been such a rich discussion. We instituted what's called the Game Over Commission starting 2 years ago. And this is 16 experts. It's the only independent organization in the United States that's studying the Nassar USAG scandal. We will be issuing a white paper in 2021 in which we will be describing an array of the many ways that the Olympic level, but also USAG gymnastics themselves need to change. There is so much to be done, but you can now find coaches that are sensitive to these issues. If I had a child that was going into gymnastics right now, I would interview the coach at length. If the coach does not permit the parents to watch, does not permit the parents near, I wouldn't take my child to that gym. I just wouldn't do it. It's too dangerous. And that's one of the markers of, we've had a series of hearings and testimony, and one of the markers of some of the most severe abuse is the fact that the parents were just shoved out of the system.
That's a great point. Yeah, parental oversight is really, really important. Chrissy or Larissa, do you have an answer to that question? Would you like me to read it again?
Can you read it again?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a loaded one. As a former collegiate gymnast, how can we go about combating and educating the youth about the manipulation and emotional and verbal abuse that tends to create an environment for sexual abuse? How do we dismantle the toxic culture within gymnastics and other sport to ensure a better culture for upcoming generations? I just remember specifically in the film that this was touched on quite a bit, that the culture of gymnastics was particularly toxic, and so it made it easier for Larry Nassar to take advantage of young girls.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the issues with gymnastics in general is that you lose all sort of your boundaries, your boundaries with your body, and so that's that. And it's difficult because you need to be spotted if you're doing a skill, and so they're touching you in places that normally you shouldn't be probably touched, but it's for your safety. And so, and I think it's maybe even as an athlete in general, you lose all sense of your boundaries as an athlete, as a person, when you are performing a sport, because you want to do the best you can do. You want to please your coach. You want to, get your skill. And so you do whatever it takes. So I think, I'm going back to it again, the biggest thing is educating yourself, educating your athletes, educating the coaches, educating the parents on what those boundaries should be. What are the boundaries between a coach and an athlete? What are the boundaries between a doctor and an athlete? What, really specifically defining what those are. And making sure that if you know an athlete ever feels uncomfortable, that athlete needs to know that it is safe for them to come forward and say, I did not like. And there's no repercussions for that, but they are supported, and you can get to the bottom of why they feel uncomfortable, and just believing them. And so again, it's just educating and knowing what those boundaries should or shouldn't be.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give an opportunity to wrap up with any final comments, any take-home messages that the panelists would like to offer tonight. Do you have any final words that you'd like to say here to the audience? And Chrissy, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, I would just love to piggyback off of what Larissa had talked about just now with boundaries. I think that is critical, that we empower our athletes. I have learned a lot, even working with the Bo Biden Foundation. What they do is they educate the children because they're the only ones with themselves all the time. And I think that the more education we can give our athletes, because sometimes they don't have a parent there, sometimes they don't have the support of a coach. There's a lot of modeling of adults also violating those boundaries with yelling and degrading and kind of taking away that self-esteem. And so I think that we get into the college environment, a lot of us say we're kind of like 14, 15 years old socially and have never even experienced any type of touching. And so I think that continually having conversation around, what environments these athletes really are in, really remembering what it feels like to be an athlete, to be risking and working your entire life for something, and to recognize what they are putting on the line for coming forward, and to have that support. I appreciate so much these panels and discussions of educating and continuing to heal us so that we can continue to keep spreading the word, and that if you are listening today, you are an athlete, you are a former athlete, as Marcy said before, it is not your fault. You are not weak. It is a systemic problem that we will continue to fight to change. And if anything, there is hope, and keep reaching out to the resources that have been offered, because there's light at the end of the tunnel. If anything I want to share is that there is hope. I believe that as we continue to come together, we will break this down. And it might take a long time, but we will continue to fight so that there's actually real change, and that we're not just talking about these systemic problems that still exist today, but that they'll get sick of hearing from us and that they'll actually change it. So thank you for letting me join you today.
Thank you for being here. You offer so much value, truly. Larissa, would you like to go ahead? Any final words?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for me is if you see or experience something that is uncomfortable or that feels wrong or just feels a little bit yucky or not even, or just makes you wonder or question, speak up. I think not just for yourself, but think about the others in your sport or the others that will come after you. Because for me personally, that is one of the biggest reasons I spoke up when I was 16, because I knew there was somebody else who had experienced the same thing as me. And that gave me motivation to be like, no, I'm going to fight for somebody else. I might not want to fight for myself, but I'll fight for somebody else. So I would say speak up no matter what, because if you don't, who will?
Thank you. And Marcy, any final words from you?
Very simple. At Child USA, we're working on these issues every day. Check it out, childusa.org. And we are actively putting together the solutions in writing with some of the world's best experts. And if you have ideas on how to improve the safety of athletes, especially in the colleges, because I think the NCAA is the weakest of all of the institutions on this, please email us at info@childusa.org. And thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Camila. It's been a pleasure. And Chrissy and Larissa, as usual, you're just inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. So much value provided tonight. And with that, our discussion has ended. And Marcy, we will include all the contact information for you in our follow-up emails to the group here tonight. So I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Marcy, Chrissy, and Larissa for joining us. Each one of you, as I've said so many times, has brought so much to the table, and we can't thank you enough for offering your expertise and your experiences. To all those who have attended tonight, a huge thank you to you as well on behalf of UC Speaks Up and the Foundation for Global Sports Development and Courage First for your presence here. I hope that you learned something and feel empowered by this discussion. Know that your attendance here is positively impacting your community. Please look for a follow-up survey that we're going to send via email at 7:30 p.m. This survey is very important for the research that we're doing on sexual violence in campus communities, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. There is incentive to participate in this survey because if you participate, you will be entered to win a Courage First swag bag. We have, I believe, 5 of them available, which includes pens, t-shirts, mugs, and Chipotle gift card with a value of either $10 or $20. Or 3 Visa gift cards for a value of $25 each. And as a reminder, this discussion will be available for you to watch at a later time, and we will send a link to that in a follow-up email. If you're interested in having a private screening and discussion for this film for your class or group at school or with an athletic team, please reach out to me at camila.mk.tan@gmail.com. And that contact information will also be included in the follow-up. As a reminder, if you feel triggered by any of this content and would like to seek support, please know that your feelings are valid and that you deserve to be supported. Please visit ucspeaksup.org/resources. Listed at that page, there are very specific resources for UCLA students. Again, thank you all for your attendance tonight. And it's my greatest hope that by continuing to talk about these difficult subjects, we can move forward together to find sustainable solutions as a community. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.